Hello, something guys and gals. This is Something Guy 912. Well, it's been a while since I've done an odd architecture on a TF2 map, 6 months in fact, which is primarily as a result of me working on the Tales from the Borderlands analysis on top of my personally ordained setup, where I would discuss a TF2 map after completing a Half-Life 2 chapter, which I had done so a few weeks ago. So, in keeping in line with the direction I went with the TF2 maps, instead of going for a poll to decide what one to cover, I just made the decision for myself to cover CP_well to coincide with my coverage of the 6 maps that came packaged with the release of the game. When I next cover a TF2 map, I will also follow up with CP_granary to complete the control point section of these maps, as gravel pit and especially hydro will be quite the undertaking to analyze in future. So with that caveat and with due diligence, let's go cover CP_well. Alright, and now we are properly in the map, and like with CTF_2 fort, what I'm going to do with this map is I will cover the red section first, and then cover the blue section. And there's also the central point where there will be some things I'll comment about, but I'll leave it for after I cover the majority of the red and blue sections. So starting with the spawn room, not really anything of note here. It's more or less the same as the other spawn rooms in the launch release of TF2. And then going out, we have, of course, the last point. And the last point is conveyed by a rocket that is just basically 20 feet below this area. Now, I don't know about you, but I imagine that if this rocket, like, the blast zone area for this control point and just the surrounding area is comically small for a rocket of this size. Like, if this rocket were to go off, this entire section would have been completely melted by the heat, and then this entire area would be covered in smog, or fog, or, smoke, or whatever, from just how much is coming out from the sheer energy of this area, of this rocket, as it were. So, I just thought that was kind of a funny thing. And then, as we go, we have these stairs here, but the interesting thing about these stairs is they're conveyed by these, wheels, so as though to be adjusted and moved around. They kind of remind me of, stairs that are used in, aircraft, and airports and whatnot. So, the implication is that you would move these around, but I'm not sure why you would move them around and what they would be moved around to. Especially given that they are, these are aligned in lockstep with the texture of this, walkway here in that fashion. So, yeah, a little bit peculiar in that regard. And then, to the left of the last point, we have this ladder with a cover over here, but the ladder ends on this random ledge for some reason instead of going all the way down. And as far as I'm aware, this ledge would not be particularly useful for anyone since, there's a ventilation shaft here, and then they have to go underneath that, and then there's just the upper roofing section of this map. So, not sure why it doesn't complete down this way. And then speaking of this, I don't know what you would say, outer, the top left, upper area of the last point, we have these, weird barriers, and I'm not sure why it's designed this way, because it's not really for, structural integrity purposes. I mean, beyond these maybe being supports, but they would be supports for this section, right? They would be below this, not beside it, in that regard. Or these little sections here, beyond just having the lampposts, so it's just a little bit peculiar in that way. And then we will move up to the top before we go back down into the little miniature hallways. We have this gap, which is I don't know what you would call this. I call it the distillery gap because a lot of the architecture of this section is to convey a distillery section. We have these beer barrels, and then out of bounds we have distilleries. But these distilleries, if I am to assume there's some kind of reservoir that's below this section, would be directly clipping with the second spawn for red down here. So yeah, that wouldn't really coincide. And then speaking of this gap and the crane thing, we have a surge switch here that is just comically out of reach for it to be used to, I guess, work around this like little crane thing and whatnot. And as for the crane itself, I'm going to assume it's probably used to move these crates up or down, but as to how somebody would roll in something for these to be stored or to be unloaded onto is another question altogether. And then to the left here, we have a second out-of-bounds section. We have this like upper like loft area, and then these two sections of what seems to be like a stairway. Now this upper one obviously kind of clips out, but it could be, you know, even though this is not detailed, this could be at least somewhat inferred that it does complete on this side. But as for this, it goes down and doesn't complete, but the other out-of-bounds section down here would not at all convey, like, it would not coincide with what this out-of-bounds section would assert. So that doesn't fall in line. And then over here we have this notable out-of-bounds section that just seems to be just more or less eye candy, I guess. They're not necessarily colliding with anything as conveyed, but obviously this will be of import regarding the blue section, because this is noticeably absent in the blue section. But before we go into what is the sniper battlements, we're going to go walk back a little bit, back down here into the two lower flanks leading into the last point. So we have another out-of-bounds section here that is surprisingly cohesive, because you have this door here, which does actually align with this door on the other side of this small conference room. And then, of course, we have another small conference room that, again, as I mentioned, would collide with the other out-of-bounds section that is above it. But as for the door itself, I mean, obviously it doesn't go anywhere, but, you know, with these, it's kind of more or less, you can kind of chalk it up to your own interpretation as to how it could be cohesive, because obviously they didn't really have it in their heads to design everything to make sense, especially if you can't see it. And then with that covered, we will go back to the sniper battlements. So going out here, we have a few sets of windows. This is more or less like sensible as far as I can tell. Oh, and I almost did forget. If you notice, the textures are actually TF2, because I remember that comment mentioning that little fix regarding the Half-Life 2 textures molding into some of the TF2 textures, and I got that mod installed for this map. Obviously, I'm going to have to uninstall it when I cover a Half-Life 2 map so that TF2 textures don't bleed into Half-Life 2 maps, but yeah. Anyway, moving on. So to the left and right of these sniper battlements, as I call them, we have these boarded up windows, like window frames to boarded up windows. Now, the natural assumption is these were boarded up because they're of no use, but out of bounds is more interior stuff, or at least conveyed to be more interior stuff. So these wouldn't be serving any purpose at all. And this is consistent with this set of windows, which this one's not even boarded up. It's just there. This is consistent with this side of the battlements as well, with these boarded up windows as well. So that's interesting in that regard. And then now we can actually go into the lead up into the second control point. And to the right of this, I don't know, balcony area, we have our infamous, just inexplicable storage of items in places that are otherwise unreachable, with these barrels and crates in a place that just seems really impractical to store them in. And then down below, of course, we have the second point. And something to keep, that I find peculiar is we have this window here to, you know, see from the inside. Now, of course, this is here for gameplay reasons, to see who's on the control point so that, you know, the red players can gauge how they're going to approach somebody attacking it, or trying to take control of it, or trying to take it back. But for practical reasons, I don't know why this is even here. Like, what is the practical use of having a window here in an otherwise interior area like this? Interior crocodile alligator. Sorry, I just had to make that reference. It just got in my head. And then moving on, we have the lower section leading up into the battlements with the notable well, because obviously this is called CP_well. But as for the well itself, I don't know what would be the purpose of this, because the water that flows in through doesn't flow in from anywhere, like, across the landscape of this map. It's like this really small, contained, like, river. And there's also lights here, which I find also funny, as just, you know, the concept of, like, they expect somebody to swim down in here. But I guess there's also arrows, so maybe they did have that in mind. So I don't know if that was just used for dumping or whatnot. And then moving to the outside, to immediately going about face on here. So we have the, you know, the signage, the distillery, all this, but, and the out of bounds section here. But all this is bullshit, because if we just move just like that, you see the problem here? So the architecture that is actually conveyed does not align with the supposed out-of-bounds texture as you lead outside from the second point in this regard. So just do that. And this is going to be the case with Blue's side as well. Probably less egregiously, but it's still the case that, you know, like, not even the rocket's being presented here. So, like, where does the rocket go? You know? Or maybe this is a sense of, like, scale, like the idea that, like, maybe you're, like, so deep into Red's area that, like, you're much farther in than what you could have, like, realistically seen from out of bounds at that point, but yeah. And then, of course, it wouldn't be a TF2 map without other smoke and mirrors. As you can see, we have more of our noticeable smoke stacks that actually do not exist and are just part of the skybox, I believe. I think if I can go, yeah, the skybox is over here. So let me fly on over, and there's our actual smokestacks. And, you know, everything else that is part of the skybox bounds. So we'll go back to the map proper. And surprisingly, even though there is problems with that, a lot of the train yard sections are surprisingly cohesive for what they provide. There's not too many collision problems. There's not, like, practical issues with them. Maybe, well, now I'm seeing it. The sign here would be colliding with this piece of the tanker on this train if it was to go frontward or backward. So that's something. Obviously, probably was just out of sight, out of mind, or just in hindsight, they didn't keep that in note. And then we go into the lead up to, I guess you could say it's like a train station. What would be the middle point? I'm not going to delve into it too much because obviously I kind of want to save more of the intermediary sections after I cover Blue and Red. But one thing to note is we have a lot of these window textures that are on the outside to imply, like, light goes in, but obviously they go nowhere. They are just completely pitch black as they are ascribed to. So I don't know why they are here. So that's just funny in that regard. And I'm not sure why this station would have, like, these small, like, roofs, if you can call them roofs, out here, beyond just, again, for gameplay's sake, so, like, a scout can double jump across here, or any, you know, class can, like, boost jump onto this section as a, you know, separate flank to the normal flank on this railway. And speaking of, I guess, before we go cover Blue section, we also have our notable fence lining here that, of course, is just put there for the sake of just keeping within map constraints. But I do find it extra humorous that as a result of these fences being here, it makes this area a lot more needlessly dangerous for people to cross through on these trains, which I think that's part of the point and kind of the perk of TF2 in that kind of sardonic way. And then with that, we will go to the Blue side. Alright, and now we are on the blue side, and until I make exceptions to it, a lot of the similar problems with blue's last point pertain to red. You know, the blast zone, the ladder with the weird ledge, these weird barrier things. But when we go up and go to, you know, the crane with the surge switch that is out of reach, instead of a distillery, we have this out of bounds section, which just seems to be a bunch of tankers. And unlike the out of bounds section on red side, this is not colliding with the blue spawn, or blue second spawn below it. So it gets away with that, but then it gets an additional thing because to our left we have a tanker that is stored just comically high up. So nobody can use it in a practical sense. It's just funny that way. You put something up like that. And then to the left here, we have a similar case of the out-of-bounds section with this, I don't know, lookout area. But this one does not have the downward ramp section that would have collided with this section of the out-of-bounds. So it's just the upstairs section, which I find interesting because I don't know if they, when they had designed the blue section, they basically essentially just mirror swapped everything around and then changed assets as they were going, and maybe they cut some things along the way. Because I figured that would have been a lot easier than trying to, like, manually make it, like, similar to red section. I mean, it's possibly the case that it's the former or not the latter. But yeah, I just find that interesting that maybe they cut some things along the way, which inadvertently made the map more cohesive as a result. And then down to the slope, as you'll notice, there is no, like, small out-of-bounds section for atmosphere. So again, it does lead me to conclude that they mirror swapped the basic, like, pathing areas, but didn't want to have the out-of-bounds section because maybe it was just way too much hassle to copy and paste that. So we're moving back into the sniper battlements again for blue, basically dissimilar from it, except for the fact that it doesn't have the problem where you have boarded up windows that would go outside to bounds where they wouldn't be, you know, directing in light of any note. So these get a pass in that regard. And now I got a little bit distracted by something. Something I did forget to mention was we had these vents here on the red side where they would just suddenly end as soon as you get to this side of the hallway. But this was on the right side of red's battlements, whereas blue's, it just suddenly ends on the left side of the battlement. So again, it does add more kindling to the fire. That is my theory, that they just mirror swapped it, which is why this is on the left side as opposed to being on the right side. Because when you mirror swap like that, you know, things are going to be slightly inverted as a result. And once again, we go down here. Same old problem with the weird window being here in that regard. The out-of-bounds section here is surprisingly cohesive with itself, with these barrels kind of being like conveyored this way. I mean, obviously the texture's not very good in terms of being a conveyor, but this is 2007, so they probably didn't have the best assets to convey that. But it's still surprising to me how cohesive this all is. Even the doors in the out-of-bounds sections are you know, like in tandem with each other. It's just interesting to consider that they actually put that amount of forethought into that. And then once again, we are into the yard that leads into the third point of blue. Again, not really much to say about here. You know, surprisingly cohesive for a train yard. Post-recording Something Guy 912 here, I did forget one small thing while I was doing my recording for CP_well. So there was a small section on the blue side leading into control point 3, where you have this rail here and this train car that is literally kissing the side of this architecture of this building here. So it'd be crashing into this with it being as close as it is to this rail line. There's something I did notice. Before I mention that, of course, the out of bounds section. So we have all these like big boilers and steam pipes, because blue is usually depicted as being more industrious than red's more like wooden and kind of like homely style. Again, this is all bullshit, because yep, right there, the interiors once again do not coincide with the assumed architecture of the out of bounds section in this regard. Now, what I was going to bring up was we have all these wirings here, notably on blue's side, and they lead around like this all the way and ends here. There is no wiring on red's side, which I find interesting, in that it just suddenly ends on this little section of red's out of bounds section. So that's funny in that regard. And now with that, I guess now we can compare and contrast. So the windows to the battlements outside here. So blues does not have a way to close their windows. They just have these small sheet metal shutters, whereas red's windows actually can open and close like this. So, you know, let out a little bit more air than people would like. So it is interesting, because I'm pretty sure in-game you can actually like stand on these. Like if you rocket jump onto them, you can stand on them. Whereas blues, I do not think you can, because they are past the bounding box of the game, I believe. Or they are not models, but they're just entities that you just fall right through on them. I could be wrong. Been a while since I played this game, in this map in particular. So don't quote me on it. Now we can actually go and discuss the middle section of the map, the central point. So the most notable thing, of course, is this weird crane structure. So with these wires and like these pulleys, it does kind of make me think that this is like wasn't here initially, and that this was just completely open to allow like trains to unload stuff onto these carts this way. I think that's the idea behind them, but I'm not entirely certain. And then another thing to note that I find peculiar is we have these sunroofs here, and you can see from the outside looking in, but you can't see from the inside looking out on either side. It's just completely opaque in that regard. So I just find that interesting. I don't know if that's just a hardware limitation of the source engine at the time, or they didn't think that they needed to make this see-through on both ends. And then a few things to discuss about the out-of-bounds section. So this middle section is obviously not being used for trains, but if it was, it wouldn't really get that far, because we have these weird brick garages that kind of like hide what's going on behind it. But on the other side, we have these, you know, rail cars here, but then it just seemingly ends here. So the trains, this train on this middle track would not be going far, and there's no junctions for them to swap to other rails, unlike what you can kind of see here with that junction connecting over there on those two train cars. So it would just be going back and forth on this small station and not do all that much, which may lead to the idea of why it was closed to begin with in that regard. And then the only other thing I could probably comment on is the peculiar decision to have the third spawn be like kind of down here in this weird like bunk area, because obviously this wasn't here for what was a train car freight station or whatever you want to call it before this whole red versus blue stuff happened. So I don't know what this would have serviced before, and obviously it's not very well detailed, which, you know, kind of leads me to believe this was kind of just thrown in last minute. And I mean, not last minute in terms of dev time, I mean last minute in terms of the world building of this game. in a sense. And I mean, most people don't even, like, you'd be hard-pressed to actually use these spawns, into a match of Dust Bowl, or a match of, CP well. Usually the game ends by the time somebody captures the second point. And with that, that is it for CP_well. And that was that for that map. I was able to get this out while nearing my completion of the Fight for Sanctuary analysis, as I want to get this out at some time during July as I prep for future analyses come August. There will be a THPS Odd Architecture video on the horizon as well, but I want to ensure that this analysis/breakdown will come to pasture. Hope you enjoyed this one at least.